Welcome, welcome, greetings, Akaro, for all of you tuning in. I'm coming from the shrine. Just finished doing the dawning work for the Anubians, for the Anu people, and for my family, for myself, for my Egun, and for the energies that support this particular work. It's a daily thing, and I'm bringing you for this experience. For however long we're going to be doing this, we'll be sharing, just some of the vibrations. We'll be sharing them together that I experience and enjoy. Let me turn this down a little bit. Got my so I was vibing on that in the shrine today as I was working, But yeah, so like I was saying, just kind of sharing the vibe of what it's like in the dawnings when I'm doing the work, and just kind of the meditations that sometimes come forth, or pretty much always come forth, that are always available to tap into. And what I wanted to share with you all today, for you to think about, is the idea of rites of passage. Okay. Now, many of you know, probably from, if you've known me for some years, been around me personally, that I do a lot of rites of passage for schools. Obviously I also come and I talk to young people a lot in the schools and whatnot. I do a lot of lecturing and workshops and stuff like that. But I do a lot of rites of passage experiences for different organizations, women's organizations, men's organizations, children's organizations, schools, churches. It goes on and on and on and on. And one of the important things that sometimes people fail to recognize, and again, I'm basing this on Yoruba culture because this is the Orisha channel, and that's primarily what we're building on, right? And rites of passage do exist in our tradition. In fact, things like getting your right hand a V5, is a part of an initiation or a part of a rite of passage, right? Getting initiated can also be considered a rite of passage. Receiving an etefa, it can be considered a rite of passage. In fact, that is typically your first acknowledged rite of passage when you come into the planet, is your etefa, is your reading that you receive when you're born. And one of the important things about it is also the naming ceremony that goes along with it. See, what I wanted to share today is, I spoke about something recently on my Chief Yuya YouTube channel. And if you're not subscribed to that channel, I advise you to subscribe to it. I put out I'd say fairly frequent content over there as well. But this channel I try to just keep for, Ifa, Orisha, Yoruba culture, and of course, I'll always blend. There'll always be some cross talk, But what I was going to say is essentially your first rite of passage is not only your birth, but your naming ceremony and the reading that you receive during such time, right? A naming ceremony is very important. It's very important, and I'm going to tell you why. Typically in a communal setting, and we're talking about mainly among the Yoruba, in a community setting, a child is not totally acknowledged until it goes through its naming ceremony. So it's understood, that, there was a child born. There's a baby, there's a boy, there's a girl, whatever. There was a child born over here. But until the child has been sanctified or more so initiated into our community, it's not completely and totally acknowledged, you see. And also what the name does is it provides understanding of that child's mission. It allows the community opportunity to consistently remind the child of said mission every time they speak to that child. So the idea of the individual, I know in Western culture the individual exists because it thinks. I think, therefore I am, right? Whereas more in Yoruba culture, the individual exists because the community acknowledges that existence. But if the community doesn't acknowledge, let's turn it down a little bit. I don't know if it's too loud for you guys. But if the community doesn't acknowledge that existence of the individual, then it's kind of not a part of the community, and therefore it kind of doesn't exist. Now, this is an important thing a lot of times when people talk about our tradition. You know, I hear that so much. Those of us who live in the diaspora, those of us who were born, you know, away from the continent, or maybe even can acknowledge that we may not even be indigenous necessarily, you know, let's say some generations back to the continent, but maybe we might have derived from somewhere else, which is okay too. Those are reasonable arguments as well. But when you say our traditions, our culture, if you have not been acknowledged into the place of the community that those traditions originate from, is not yours to say that. You see? Just because you read a book or you watch a video by me or listen to a podcast, and then you go buy yourself an Orisha book, and then you say, well, this is our stuff. That doesn't bring you in. You know, one of the important things is not only getting that divination, that Tefa, and many of you have gotten Tefas by me, so you know what that process is like, and for some of you, the onus that it puts on you, getting all of that information, and now know, oh, this is the direction I came in here to go. This is the mission I came to fulfill, and these are the people who came with me to fulfill it, right? So one of the important things also is receiving a name. It's very important. Very, very important. You know, because your name denotes what community you're a part of, right? And I mean, that's pretty easy to figure out, right? We don't need, it's not really rocket science, you know, that a name immediately lets a person know not only what community you may be a part of, but also your nationality, right? And even though you may say, well, let's say, you know, I'm melanin dominant, but I have a Scottish last name or a German last name. I'm not Scottish or German, but maybe that is your nationality, because that's what you're claiming just in the very titles that you allow to be applied to you, or that you accept and continue to apply to you. Those very titles will do that for you, right? So the idea, again, you know, in Yoruba culture, typically after 8 days, the baby is named, right? And in different cultures do it different, but like the Akan and the Yoruba, they both pretty much 8 days after the birth, right? And typically there's a divination that's done. You know, let's find out who this child is, because the child is always considered as an answer. The child is a blessing. There's a lot of celebration. There's a lot of rejoicing when a child comes through. And that's primarily because, you know, children help to expand and strengthen the community. Every child that comes forth can push the community further and keep the community alive, keep the village alive, keep the people alive. So children are a very important and special thing in our culture, right? And of course, you know, I'm also speaking about our new culture as well. I don't claim to necessarily live Yoruba culture or you know, any other culture than our new culture. All right, but within that, as some of you may know, there is assimilation and dissection and amalgamation of many other sensible and right ways of doing things, you know, that I have found and dug up and scraped and refined and looked at once it was shined up from the continent and really from a global context. All right, so again, the child is typically named after that 8th day, and you know, there's rejoicing. A lot of times there's offerings given. In some places you might even have a goat that's given or a chicken that's given to thank the ancestors who are considered to be like the masters of fertility, right? So, you know, they blessed us with this new baby, and we did the readings, we did the divination, so we know what the baby is here for. And then on top of that, now this is the baby's name. So now we can embrace and acknowledge this child as ours. This is our child now. You know, this is our baby, not necessarily the parents by themselves, but this is our baby because we have acknowledged, we have heard the name, we have heard, and the name tells the charge, it tells the attribute, and we have all heard it together, right? So think about that when you sometimes, especially for those of you who find yourself out there without community, who find yourself kind of drifting in the wind, and like, well, I'm studying, I'm picking up a little bit of this, I listened to this podcast, I watched this video, I done read this book, whatever, but you're still kind of feeling honestly lost. You're still kind of feeling missionless. A lot of that is because you've never received that level of divination, number one, and you've never been formally acknowledged as existing within a community. You see, even if you were baptized as a child or you were christened as a child, what community were you acknowledged inside of in doing that? Right? So if you say you deal with the Orisha sciences, you deal with Ifa, but you were never acknowledged by an Ifa or Orisha community, then again, according to our customs and our way of thinking, you really actually don't even exist. You don't exist. You see? So that first rite of passage, that first initiation, initiations are not just what you get when you go to a Babalao or Ianifa or you know, a reader and they say, or an elder and they divine and say you need to go here, go there. That's not just an initiation. An initiation is when you're initiated or you're brought into something. So being initiated into a community, being initiated into a people is a part of your walk as a person who venerates the Orisha, as a person who strives to live by the character, honesty, and laws of Ifa. You see, it begins with your major initiation, and there's several major initiations. We'll go through them right now. I just wanted to just talk about that one. The name. A name is important, you see, and having that name acknowledged by those who you consider to be your kin is very important. And a lot of times we waste our time and energy on people who we don't even consider to be our same frequency, our same vibration. You see, that's problematic. So in this tradition, you know, coming up amongst those who are rejoicing that we're here, no different than like a wedding. I'm not a huge advocate of having 1,000 people at your wedding. I'm an advocate of having people at your wedding who want you to be married, who want to support the marriage for as long as they possibly can, who want to be a strength to you and your mate for as long as they possibly can, and consequently the children that come as a result of that marriage. And that may mean by the time you get married, you may have 2 people there. You may have 1 person, you may have 3 people there. You know, when you start thinking in that way, well, what is my community? Who am I really rejoicing in front of? Who do I need to acknowledge this relationship in front of? Who do I need to acknowledge this child in front of? Even when I do these segments, I'm not talking to everybody. I'm talking to a select few, right? I'll never say a name, but I'm talking to a select few because many may claim Ifa, many may claim Orisha, but how many have really brought themselves into that community and have allowed themselves to be open to scrutiny, chastisement, love, correction, reformation, refinement, you know, character development? Very few. Very, very, very few. And I mean in a healthy way. In a healthy way. When you go through your naming ceremony, your mother's there and your father's there. It's family, you see, which is a smaller model of the community. So think about that for those of you who belong to houses where it's just a woman who runs it, no man. It's just a man who runs it, no woman. What are they initiating and bringing you into? Are they bringing you into a functional environment that reflects what it is that this tradition upholds and honors and rejoices? Or are they bringing you into an environment that mirrors and personifies and typifies the dysfunction that we've taken on in the diaspora and have begun to accept as normal, even though it's highly unnatural? All right? So that's your thought for the day. That's your Orisha Ifa thought today from the shrine. This has been Chief Yuya. Readings, AskOsiris.com. go to theorisha.com for more podcasts. You can get the podcasts, and like I said, we got some books coming forth. We got a lot of good stuff coming forth. I'm not saying everything, but there's a lot of really good projects I have on the table right now that I know you're going to want to support, going to want to be a part of, and going to want to have in your personal spiritual tools and archives. At least I think you will. Let me just say, I think you will. Hopefully you will. Hopefully you'll appreciate and enjoy what's coming forth. And if you don't, I'll do something else. No, I'm lying. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. All right. That has been the Orisha broadcast. All right. Everyone drive safe, man. Move safe. And make sure whatever you're doing, you're inching towards closer and closer to your destiny. You're not just making cyclical movements. And really give a lot of important thought as to what your title and attribute is and what people are charging every day and every moment when they're saying your name and calling you. All right? Until such time, Odabo. This is Chief Yuya signing out.